Hey there, it's Lara here. Welcome to Witchy Wednesday, your weekly astrology forecast. This one's for the week of June 5th to 11th, 2019. Thanks for being here. As always, I so appreciate your support. The likes, the shares, the comments, the connecting on Instagram and Facebook, ordering readings, all of that. I really do appreciate it. And you can connect with me at my website. The link is below. And if you're a new subscriber, thanks so much. I hope you stick around and that the messages I have here resonate with you. So we have the moon currently in Cancer today, and we have a lot of energy brewing in Cancer opposite the energy that's in Capricorn. And this is going to be the focus of what we talk about for the majority of the video today. But before I do that, just a few other things to note, right? So moon is currently in Cancer, where she likes being. She's at home in Cancer, right? The moon rules Cancer. The moon rules our moods, moods, right? And so as the moon changes signs, we feel the ebbs and flows in our emotions, in our emotional body. So on Thursday, she's moving into Leo, and then into Virgo on Saturday, and into Libra on Monday. And in next week's video, I will speak to the full moon in Sagittarius that will be happening around that time, over the course of that time span. So we also have Mercury now, ensconced in Cancer as well, at just the beginning degrees there. And we have Venus entering Gemini on the 8th, on Saturday. And when Venus moves into Gemini, our focus in terms of our relationships, our values, these kinds of things that Venus rules, even beauty, aesthetic, that kind of thing, will be filtered through that Gemini lens, right? So a lot of perhaps thinking, talking, socializing, communicating about those matters. And then we also have asteroid Vesta entering Taurus on Sunday. I won't say too much about that, except for the fact that wherever Vesta sits in our chart, right? Vesta is the goddess of the hearth, charged with keeping the home fires burning. And wherever she sits in our chart, we can feel this call to a sacred mission, of sorts in that area of our chart. And so with Vesta moving into Taurus, collectively, we may feel called to be more on a mission to care for the earth, right? Taurus is very connected to the earth, to our security, to the material world, to the planet. And we can see this energy being heightened out there in the collective. And I think with Vesta moving into Taurus, there will be even more focus of this kind of it's our collective sacred mission to care for the earth in whatever way that looks like to us, right? So I wanted to mention that. But the focus of what I want to talk about today is Mars in Cancer, which Mars moved into Cancer on May 17th. So I've spoken a little bit about this already in past videos, but Mars is making a closer and closer connection to the North Node there in Cancer, and to some other planetary energy. So there's a lot of concentration in the Cancer area of our charts. Eventually the Sun will move in there too later on in the month, right? But and that is opposite what's going on in Capricorn, which we've spoken about all over the course of this year, right? And we will continue to speak about you've no doubt heard other astrologers talk about it as well, right? Saturn, Pluto up there in Capricorn, getting closer and closer together, culminating in early 2020, eventually Jupiter entering that area as well, and conjuncting Pluto as well. So We have this energy of Mars in Cancer, right? Mars is like a fiery energy in the water sign of Cancer. Mars is not necessarily all that comfortable in Cancer because Mars is about action, external drive, sort of will, and aggression in some ways. Whereas Cancer is about the internal, the nurturing, the private, the emotional. And so these two energies together, kind of fire and water in a sense, can be quite steamy, right? And eruptive. And frustrating in some ways. Like think of trying to run Mars through water, Cancer. It's not easy to do, right? It can be a bit, we can feel resistance. And this energy can really be firing up our emotional pain as well. But the good news is, and this is what I really want to focus on, anger can lead to progress if it's dealt with properly, right? Sometimes we need anger to kind of light a fire under our ass and to do something, right? To make changes, to fight in some ways for what we really know is right, for what needs to happen, for changes in our lives. And when I say fight, I don't mean in a nasty, aggressive, physical way. So just be mindful of that, because this energy can have us really butting heads with people, lashing out, and that's not ultimately what we want to happen. But sometimes, sometimes things need to be expressed, sometimes they need to be said, and sometimes anger needs to surface in order to be released, and for us to evolve and grow and to make changes, right? So it's like fuel for change. And in some ways we're talking about anger as being kind of like a sacred energy at this point in time, if we are conscious and aware and choose to use it that way for our kind of karmic release and our evolution individually and collectively, right? So I want to show you the chart right now and then carry on with what I'm saying. Here we have the chart for today, June 5th. And let's start with looking at all of this energy in the sign of Cancer that I was just mentioning. So there we have Mars currently at 13 degrees Cancer. And we have the moon in Cancer as well, until when it moves into Leo tomorrow. But we've also, so that's a fleeting energy, but nevertheless, it's there and it adds to what's going on here. We have the North Node currently at 17 degrees of Cancer, and then we've got Mercury just entered Cancer as well. And eventually, like I said, the sun is going to move in there later in the month, right? But we've got a lot of energy here, and we've got Mars getting closer and closer to the North Node. So I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. But opposite that, there we have Pluto, Saturn, and obviously the South Node in the sign of Capricorn, right? And so as Mars gets closer to the North Node, it will transit exact opposite, right? Saturn, Pluto, and obviously the South Node up there. So look at this dynamic energy, this red kind of fiery, tense energy happening here, right? Something needs to be resolved. Something needs to be balanced here. And then I want to draw your attention to this kind of triangular shape that you see as well. And it's not sort of, we will have what's called a grand water trine when the moon eventually moves into Scorpio. We will have a water trine between what's going on in Cancer, between Neptune and Pisces, and then when the moon is in the sign of Scorpio, there will be this supportive, helpful trine. But we do also have some very supportive energy between Neptune in Pisces that is making a trine to this energy, a supportive trine. A trine is a conversation of ease and flow and support, just like a sextile. So Neptune is sextiling the energy up in Capricorn, also a conversation of ease, of opportunity. Sextiles are often opportunities, right? And so although we do have this tension, we also have some support to lead us through this. This tension. And I don't have Vesta, who I mentioned here, but she will, as I said, be moving into the sign of Taurus, along with, meeting up with Uranus there. And then we've got Jupiter up here in Sagittarius, and there's an opposition to the sun happening. I spoke about that in last week's video, so I won't go over that again here. But if you didn't listen to the new moon in Gemini video from last week, it would be a good idea to do that. Okay, so here's the chart. And so we were talking about, the Mars and Cancer energy, and that sort of energy of sacred anger and karmic release meeting up with the North Node. Because to refresh your memory, or in case you didn't know this, the North Node symbolizes what we are evolving towards, right? It's like what our soul wants us to experience more of, to become more of, to embrace more of. And wherever the North Node sits in our personal charts, that's what that indicates. Collectively, for all of us, the North Node is sitting in Cancer. So we are being drawn towards that energy and being asked to release the South Node, right? In Capricorn. So to not necessarily, like, I'm not a believer that like you need to leave the South Node behind. That's something that we have a lot of experience in, wherever the South Node is sitting. And it's sitting in Capricorn right now, right? That energy of hierarchy, of ambition, of sort of like the patriarchal structures, of going for it and getting what I want, no matter what or who is standing in my way, of also of like maturity. Capricorn is very much the sign of the divine father kind of thing. But that energy, right, can be taken to the point of being overly authoritarian. And so we are being asked to evolve through that, and to regain a sense of balance there and move more towards the nurturing energy of Cancer, right? So with Mars meeting up with the North Node, we may feel this real urge and perhaps some frustration, because we've got Saturn and Pluto opposite this energy, right? Some frustration, some feelings of we don't really have control over our own lives, and we get frustrated and angry. And, this anger can lead us to something's got to change, something's got to give, right? And that can be a very, very positive, essential, necessary thing. But we have to be mindful of how we move through that, how we work with it. So, that axis of Cancer Capricorn is lit up at this time, and offering us an opportunity to really do some deep healing work and to be motivated to change. And we also have, with the support from Neptune and Pisces, there's this element of like divine intervention, right? Of support from the universe, of having, of keeping the faith, even in difficult and challenging times. So, excuse me, we we want to draw on that and harness that Neptunian energy. So as I mentioned to you, Cancer, that's the sign of the feminine energy. Cancer is a feminine water sign, a cardinal sign, so an initiator, just like Capricorn. Cancer and Capricorn are cardinal signs, right? Cardinal signs are that energy of initiation, and an instinct kind of thing. So Cancer is about home, about family, about nurturing, about emotional security, about our early childhood experiences, about attachment and comfort and safety, and the mother and the mother wound potentially as well, right? And then Capricorn is about the masculine, about structure and responsibility and ambition, and kind of about, authority and sucking it up and growing up and that kind of thing, about mastery and discipline and self-sufficiency. So this axis is really being lit up for all of us right now. And there is a call to balance these things, right? And when these two energies are balanced, it's like the axis of parenting, right? And parenting ourselves. And so when these two energies are in perfect harmony, it's like the optimal parent, right? The perfect parent kind of thing. No such thing, but really, but firm, but fair, right? This is also about our security, our material security, financial security, which is Capricorn, and our emotional security, which is Cancer. And, having our needs met on every level. That's what this is about. So we might feel some, like I said, some lack of control over our lives, some anger, some agitation, some buried emotions bubbling up. This may play out on the home front with people closest to us, right? We may even, on a mundane level, have this urge, something we need to really, do something around our house, because that is very Cancerian too. So, and Mars is somewhat connected to real estate. So it's like, it could be like fixing up, renovating, selling, buying, that kind of thing going on, and really driven to do that. And that may be causing some tension as well. But there is a need for changing the status quo that's driven by our desire for emotional security, for nurturing, for connection, right? And the energy is playing out most notably on a specific axis in each of our charts, wherever Capricorn and Cancer sit for us. And I'm going to get to that for each of us very shortly here. And it's being supported by Neptune and Pisces, right? So wherever Neptune and Pisces is sitting in our chart, and I'll mention that to you as well, for each sign, this is where we may feel some spiritual intervention, some divine intervention, some strong intuition, a compassionate force, something from beyond that is supporting us through this, whatever it is that we're working through here. And I read a quote a while back on, I think it was on Instagram, and the woman, I think it's a woman's name, is Randi Buckley. And it said, "Holy is the anger that leads to our resilience." And so I want you to think of this energy, this Mars in Cancer, combining with the North Node as that. It wants us to act and fix something that needs fixing in our lives or in the world. But it wants us to come at that with the support of Neptune, right? It may be us, having to kind of just trust that the universe has our back and has our best interest at heart, even though it may not seem like it. But this requires us to come from a place of compassion for ourselves. Don't lose yourself in the process. Don't forget about yourself in the process. And for others, right? So the collective. And if we act from a desire to make things better for all of us, ourselves included though, ourselves and others, then that's really the best way to use this energy. And without further ado, let's move through each of the signs now, and I'm going to speak to the axis that this is playing out on for you. So the Cancer Capricorn axis, what houses that's falling in for you, and then the support from Neptune and Pisces and where that's falling for each sign as well. So I'm going to start with Cancer because there's a concentration, as I mentioned, of energy happening in Cancer. And just a reminder to listen first and foremost for your rising sign. That will be the most obvious and accurate usually with these general forecasts, right? And I've explained why that's so in the past. And then listen for your sun sign and your moon sign, right? That will give you different layers of information. And basically, in these general forecasts, it's more accurate to look at rising sign because, we know, for example, that Cancer, if you're a Cancer rising, your first house is ruled by Cancer. Whereas if you're a Cancer sun sign, without looking at your specific birth chart, I don't know where the sun is sitting, in what specific house it's sitting for you. So that's why that's so. I know I explain this a lot, but I explain it to reinforce that and for any new folks that happen to be watching the videos. So we've got, we're going to start with Cancer. So Cancer, this energy is really concentrated on you and on the axis of relationship for you because it's in your first house, right? Mars, the North Node, Mercury, all in your first house of the self, of your individual expression and journey through life, of your physical appearance and vitality, of your instinctual approach to the world, of your persona, like how the world sees you, how you present to the world, right? So that's where all this energy, Mars, North Node, and Mercury is concentrated for you, opposite Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node in Capricorn. So this is, as I said, the axis of relationship, the self and the other, one-to-one relationships. All things relationship are being highlighted for you. So how you are in relationship to yourself, how you are in relationship to significant other people in your life, whether that be, marriage partners or, people that you live with, business partnerships, rivals, very close personal friends, these kinds of things. This is the axis being lit up for you. And there may be some anger may bubble up here, some anger, some resentment, some emotional things that have been stifled and need to be released, right? And you're getting some support from Neptune in Pisces, which is sitting in your 9th house. And this is the 9th house of teachers, of students, or teaching and learning, right? But wisdom, people you may encounter that may offer you some support, courses, classes, books, even higher learning, programs, travel, people from foreign cultures, things you learn through foreign cultures, your philosophy, your belief system, how you kind of think about these things. And so that's where the supportive energy is happening for you in relation to working through those things on the relationship axis. Okay, Cancer, so I'm going to leave that there for you. I hope that gives you enough to go on. I want to get through all the signs here. So I'm going to move on to Leo, where we have Cancer sitting in the 12th house for you and Capricorn in the 6th. So this is the axis of the spiritual, right? And the hidden and the unseen, and what happens in solitude and behind closed doors and at a sort of unconscious level, versus the day-to-day, the daily grind, your intentional daily activities and routines, health and wellness routines, self-development, these kinds of things, which you do, those tasks you do on the day-to-day versus how you spend time in rest and reflection, which is the 12th house. So conscious, behaviors versus unconscious, potentially self-sabotaging behaviors. That's where Mars and Mercury and the North Node are sitting for you in that 12th house of Cancer. So there may be some kind of tension playing out here on this axis of rest and work, of unconscious versus intentional, of what happens, kind of under the surface versus what is visible on the day-to-day. Your spiritual health versus your kind of physical health, potentially as well. And you've got some support on offer, Leo. In terms of Neptune in Pisces in the 8th house, which is about your intimate relationships, which is about other people's money or the resources that, you have access to that are connected to others. So this can be mortgages, insurance, taxes, credit cards, business payments, like business holdings or investors, that kind of thing, investments. So, and this also has to do, the 8th house also governs that cycle of transformation, right? Death and rebirth cycle, not necessarily literally, but cycle of transformation of whatever's going on in the deep psyche that is calling to be healed, right? Deep psychological healing. Anything that feels very intimate and vulnerable falls in the 8th house. And so Neptune's sitting there offering you some support through this process. And so draw on that as best you can at this time, Leo. All right, moving on to Virgo. Virgo, the Cancer energy is sitting in your 11th house, right? Mars, North Node, Mercury. And the 11th house is about our connection to the collective, friendship groups, associations, clubs, networks, even online groups, or, how we connect through people, through the internet, that kind of thing. This also has to do with our hopes and dreams for the future. The 11th house rules that, and the people that can support us with that, right? And so this is sitting opposite the 5th house. So this is the axis of the collective, the 11th, versus the individual, that's the 5th. Of collaborations, that's the 11th, versus personal creations. It is what we create on our own, our individual self-expression is the 5th house. The 5th house rules children. This is where Capricorn's sitting as well. Children, our inner child, our creative self-expression, how we have fun in life. And then the Cancer energy in the 11th house that I already spoke to, right? And so there can be some tension here, some rebalancing that needs to happen, and some anger bubbling up in relation to these things. But you're getting some support from Neptune in the 7th house of one-to-one relationships. And so, a close personal relationship may prove supportive to you at this time in whatever way, right? And so, look to your close personal connections to help you through any tensions that may be going on. And there may be some kind of divine intervention in a way felt in that 7th house area of your chart over this time. So pay attention to that. All right, Virgo. And moving on now to Libra, we've got Cancer sitting in the 10th house for you and Capricorn in the 4th. So Cancer, Mars, the North Node and Mercury piling up there in the house of career, of your highest ambitions, of the legacy, the public legacy that you leave, of your relationship to authority, your public reputation. And then, opposite Capricorn in the fourth house, where Saturn and Pluto are, and the South Node, and that is about the home, the family, the foundations, the place of living, what happens on a more sort of private, internal level as well, closer to home, right? So it's this axis of public and private, career, home, the external versus the internal. That is what is being lit up for you, and at this time, and perhaps charged with that fiery Mars energy at this time. And you're going to have some support and some sort of divine intervention happening through Neptune in the sixth house, which is your health and wellness routines, your day-to-day routines, your own self-development, self-help kind of efforts, how you are in service to others, and potentially even relationships between superiors and subordinates. I really don't like those words, but it's a good way to express it, right? People that are not on an equal playing field. So there may be some divine intervention that takes place there, and some support on offer, for you through the sixth house, through Neptune and Pisces in the sixth house. So pay attention to what the universe is trying to help you with over this time. All right, Libra. And I'm going to move on now and talk about Scorpio. Hey, Scorpio. So we've got Cancer sitting in the ninth house for you. And that's where Mars, Neptune, Mercury, right, are all sitting opposite the third house, where Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node are in Capricorn. So this is the axis of the higher mind, ninth house, versus the lower mind, third house. It's the axis of communications. It's the big picture, ninth house, versus the day-to-day, right? Big picture kind of thoughts, ideas, philosophies, versus the day-to-day interactions and ways of communicating. It is the immediate environment, that's the third house, versus the big wide world, the ninth house. Kind of our earlier education or earlier learning versus higher learning, right? Local travel versus more long distance travel. What's close to home versus what's foreign, these kinds of things. Okay, so this is what's being lit up for you, and there may be some tension arising here, something that needs some balancing here, some karmic releasing going on, as far as communications and all things that I just, in those arenas that I just spoke about. And you've got some support on offer from Neptune in your fifth house, of your creative self-expression, of your inner child, of your children or children that you work with, or are associated with in any way, of what sparks joy for you. And so that's where Neptune is offering you some support, saying have some faith here, offering some divine intervention, some intuition even, in these areas, right? And so helping you work through whatever is evolving through that ninth, third house axis that we just spoke about. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Scorpio. And I'm going to move on to speak with Sagittarius now, where we've got Cancer sitting in the eighth house for you, opposite Capricorn in the second house, right? So Mars, Mercury, and the North Node in the eighth house, and then Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node in the second house. So this is the axis of transformation, eighth house, versus concrete form, which is the second house, right? Of shared resources, eighth house, versus my resources, second house. Of the psychological, eighth house, versus the material, second house. So this is the axis that's being highlighted for you with these energies, and throughout June, and really coming to a head in mid sort of June, around the 13th and 14th, as I mentioned at the beginning, at the intro. And so there is something here that wants to be balanced, that wants to be harmonized in some way, some tension to work through, and you are getting some support. My heat just kicked on, by the way. I don't know if you can hear that. Apologies, but it's June 5th and the heat is going on. Gives you an idea of what the weather's like here. So I'm sorry, but so Neptune is lending you some support. It's sitting in your fourth house of home, of family, of your roots, your ancestry, your place of living, your connection to your tribe, you know, of your emotional security. Neptune is lending you some support in this life area, some divine intervention, saying have some faith. You know, forces beyond what can be seen, or perhaps even, you know, really known, are there to help you out, and lend you some support through this process. So, you know, take that willingly and tune into that and tap into it and have faith through this transition, and through this you know, this change and this rebalancing and this karmic releasing that's happening for you on that axis. All right, Sagittarius. So you're you know, maybe working through something that involves your self-worth, that's connected to the worth of others, right? Your relationship to your own security versus you know, where you're vulnerable, you know, those areas of life that you're vulnerable, through, again, your psychological healing, and how that may be connected to your sense of self-worth and your values. That's second house as well. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of something to go on there, Sag. And we're going to move on to Capricorn now. Capricorn, this Cancer energy is sitting in the 7th house, opposite your first house, right? So this is the axis of relationship. So Mars, North Node, and Mercury are piling up there in the sign of Cancer in your 7th house. That's the house of the other, your one-to-one relationships, whether they be marriage partnerships, contractual partnerships, you know, a significant other, close personal friendships, business partnerships, even rivals. And opposite Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node in the first house of the self, of me, of my journey through life, of my instinctual approach to the world, of my physical vitality, of how I appear, you know, and present to the world, and how I instinctually come at the world. And so there is some sort of tension in this area for you that's being highlighted, you know, and really coming to this kind of hot spot in the middle of June. But you are getting some support from Neptune in the 3rd house in Pisces. And that is the house of siblings, of peers, of your immediate environment, of your communications on the day-to-day, your method of communicating, your thoughts, even internal dialogue, right? That's what the 3rd house speaks to. And so there is some kind of divine intervention on offer for you here, and, you know, helping you kind of work through this sacred anger, right, that we spoke about in the introduction, and what needs to be released, perhaps on a very karmic level for you right now. And so you may, you know, find some support through, as we spoke about, those 3rd house people and things, and look to where the universe wants to support you there, and take it, right? Have faith that the universe has your back. So moving on to Aquarius, we've got Cancer sitting in the 6th house for you. and Capricorn in the 12th. So Mars, Mercury, North Node sitting in the 6th house, Saturn, Pluto, South Node sitting in the 12th house. This is the axis of the day-to-day, daily routines, including health and wellness routines, our sort of self-development efforts, versus our spiritual life. So our kind of more physical health versus our spiritual health. Our what we do at work on the day-to-day, and when I say work, I don't just mean like work at a job, but our daily tasks, those can be unpaid as well. Work versus rest, the intentional daily actions and routines versus our unconscious sort of behaviors, right? And so there is some tension happening here. And that needs to be balanced, that needs to be looked at, that needs to be resolved. And you've got some support from Neptune sitting in your 2nd house of your values, your self-worth, your security in the world, like how you provide for yourself. So literally your material resources and finances, that kind of thing. There is some support on offer for you here. And so have faith, right, in that, and that this is all happening for a reason, and accept the help that's on offer for you at this time, okay, to work through some of those issues, Aquarius. Moving now to Pisces, this is happening in your 5th and 11th houses. So Cancer sits in the 5th house for you, Pisces, of children, of what sparks joy for you, of your creative self-expression, right? Individual creativity kind of thing. And then opposite Capricorn in the 11th, which is the house of the collective. And collaboration sort of thing, of the group, right? And the house of hopes and dreams for the future. And so there's some kind of tension that's happening here between these two areas of the chart that needs to be worked through. And you've got some support from Neptune sitting in your 1st house of the self, of your individual journey through life, and your instinctual approach to life, which is often very intuitive, that can help you right now, Pisces, through how you are perceived by the outside world, through your physical vitality. All of these things are being offered Neptunian support right now, and this area of your chart can help you work through whatever else is going on at this time. So moving on to Aries, you've got Cancer sitting in the 4th house and Capricorn in the 10th. So this is the axis of the private versus the public, of home versus career, of the internal versus the external, right? Of the legacy we build at home on the home front versus the public legacy that we leave. And so there is some tension happening here, some things that need to be worked through, resolved, released. And Aries, you're getting some support from Neptune in the 12th house. The 12th house of the spiritual, of the unseen, of our dreams, of how we spend time in solitude and reflection, recuperating, rest, what we do behind closed doors, of our unconscious, perhaps, behaviors. Of the, just the unseen world in general. And so there is some Neptunian support on offer for you. And really the universe, has your back. Neptune's at home in the 12th house. And so have faith, that all will be well in the end, Aries. And remember, anger that's bubbling up right now is there to serve a sacred purpose. So be mindful of that. Next, we're going to talk to Taurus. And so Taurus, you've got Cancer sitting in your 3rd house and Capricorn sitting in your 9th house. So Mars, North Node, and Mercury in the 3rd, and Saturn, Pluto, South Node in the 9th, right? And so this is the axis of the lower mind. That's the 3rd house versus the higher mind. It's the axis of communications, right? The day-to-day communications versus the bigger picture. Our daily thoughts, text messages, back and forth in internal dialogue versus sort of the bigger picture, philosophies and belief systems and that kind of thing. And, local travel versus more long distance travel, our peers versus, teachers and gurus kind of thing, these kinds of things. So there is some tension playing out on this axis for you, and you're being offered some support through Neptune sitting in your 11th house in Pisces, which is the collective, your friendship groups, organizations, clubs, associations, even people that you network with online, and your hopes and dreams for the future. And so Neptune is offering you some divine intervention there and helping you and supporting you through whatever tension is happening on that 3rd and 9th house axis, whatever sacred anger is bubbling up, right, to be released, whatever, and fueling some kind of change for you. So that's for you, Taurus. And last but not least, we've got Gemini. And so Gemini, we've got Cancer sitting in your 2nd house and Capricorn in your 8th, right? So this is the axis of form, physical form. That's the 2nd house. Our physical resources, our material resources, including money, versus that which we share with others, right? Those shared resources. So the material versus the psychological. That's this axis. And we've got Neptune offering you some support with whatever tension is brewing here. Neptune sitting in your 10th house of career, of your public reputation, of authority figures, of, your highest ambitions and the public legacy that you wish to leave. So Neptune is offering you some divine intervention, some support through this 10th house and saying, pay attention to what I have to offer you here and have faith, right? And this can lend you some support working through that axis of the 2nd, 8th house, where some tension may be arising and brewing for you. So I hope that that's been helpful. Leave me any comments, questions below, and let me know how this energy is playing out for you. As I said, it's not culminating till next week.